What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Wednesday, March 7th, 2018, middle of the weekday, hump day, starting that long, slow glide down to Pauhana Friday, and whatever other insanity is due in store. And before we get into the news here, I want to make a comment. The propaganda that we're seeing in the corporate media has just gone right through the roof. And two examples that I saw just this morning. Fox News is showcasing this supposed North Korean defector who's saying, oh, things are so terrible in North Korea, please come and save us. And Kim Jong-un is a dictator and life is so free and wonderful here in the United States of America. And one reason that you might want to question that is because before the war on Iraq, the corporate media had Iraqi defectors, or people they claimed were Iraqi defectors who are out there saying, oh yes, Saddam's got those nuclear weapons. And the other one is a story that came out of the British media. Now, as you know, this former Russian spy, double agent, and his daughter are in the hospital. They were exposed to what has been identified as a nerve agent. And there was an article out there claiming that Putin was saying, we will poison you. If you try and poison, you will swallow our poison, blah, 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 blah. Now, they don't say where or when he supposedly said this. And frankly, it doesn't sound like Putin's. It's not his style. Khrushchev, maybe, yes. Remember banging the shoe on the table at the UN, we will bury you? But that's not Putin's style. They're just making this stuff up to push that war agenda as hard as they can. Now, the good news is more and more indications are that the American people are pretty much done with the corporate media and the politicians. We're sick and tired of being lied to over and over and over again. And we understand the wisdom of that old saying, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. And we're just tired of living in this real-life matrix where everything is an illusion to get us to do what those in power want us to do. Now, getting on to the domestic policies, and by the way, the phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. The House Intelligence Committee investigation is now turning to John Kerry and the State Department because as they start digging deeper and deeper about this bogus dossier, they're starting to realize it does reach back into the Obama administration. And again, this whole Pizzagate situation, they're digging back further and further, and it's looking like it extended beyond Hillary and the DNC. Now, as you've probably heard by now, Gary Cohn has resigned from the White House. And this is actually a good thing because Cohn led the way in purging Trump's nationalist advisors from the White House, including Steve Bannon, in order to promote the kinds of globalist establishment policies that benefit firms like Goldman Sachs, where he previously served as number 2. And Cohn and his pal, Dina Powell, were brought in by Jared Kushner. Now, apparently, the final blow was the battle over the tariffs, where Cohn said, no, this is not a good idea because tariffs work against the globalist agenda by putting up more barriers at national borders. But it's a good start. Trump needs to get back his nationalist, Make America Great Again advisors, because he's surrounded by advisors who are pushing for war and for globalism and the new world order. Trump needs to put on those presidential brass knuckles and start cleaning house. Now, Devin Nunes is saying that ever since they sent out a series of questions about that Clinton dossier, apparently some of the Obama officials who were on that list to answer those questions have sort of gone away. They can't be found. And Nunes is saying they're basically hiding from us. They don't want to answer the questions. If they don't, they're going to be subpoenaed. You try hiding from a subpoena, you can get into some real trouble. And here's a breaking story. This is from the Political Insider. We were talking about how FBI agent Peter Strzok, an avowed anti-Trumper, had known that Hillary's server, her private email server, had been broken into by a foreign power and did nothing about it. Well, apparently, this went much higher than Peter Strzok. Remember, former FBI Director James Comey confirmed the Hillary server was hacked. And basically, we know that they changed the wording on the final FBI report on the server to help Clinton avoid federal charges. They changed extreme negligence, which is verbatim Title 18, to reckless, careless. It's really the same thing here. But Fox News is reporting that Strzok's ignoring of the breach was actually approved with the consent of then President Barack Obama. So, if Hillary was running an espionage ring out of the State Department, Obama was in on it. It looks like the entire government was penetrated between the Awan brothers hacking into members of Congress computers, Hillary's weak email server, and the rest of it. It looks like our entire government was penetrated under the Obama administration. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Now, Senate Homeland Security Committee Chairman Ron Johnson has basically fired off a letter to Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein asking why the FBI waited weeks to act on the Clinton emails on Anthony Weiner's laptop. Well, we know that they didn't want to deal with them at all, but that members of the New York Police Department said, if you don't deal with this, we're going to go public. And that's what forced Comey's hand there so close to the actual election. It has now come on out. Former FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe was authorizing leaks to the media and giving misleading statements to investigators about doing so. This is coming from two new independent reports. Now, McCabe authorized FBI officials to speak to the media for articles prior to the 2016 election, including one about an ongoing investigation into the Clinton Foundation, according to a report prepared by Justice Department Inspector General Michael Horowitz, who, at least at first glance, appears to actually be trying to do his job. Now, the FBI's number 2 man also misled watchdog investigators when they initially asked about the media disclosures. They really are all corrupt here. Now, let's get on back to Alexander Downer. Now, Alexander Downer is a former Australian diplomat, and he was the one whose tip reportedly really kicked off this deep state probe on Trump. And it turns out he's a longtime Clinton associate. And so at this point, all 4 initiators of the Trump collusion probe were paid by Hillary or donors to the Clinton Foundation or known Clinton associates. Now, Hillary's spokesparrot was asked about this and said she didn't know. She had no idea. What an amazing coincidence, not to be believed. Trey Gowdy is calling for a second special counsel, and of course he's getting pushback from Attorney General Sessions. But Trey Gowdy is saying the Inspector General Horowitz cannot access Comey and McCabe. They're no longer within the government. They don't have to respond to an informal request for information. And Gowdy is saying it is more than time for a second special counsel to look into this whole FISA-gate, Dossier-gate story. Meanwhile, Tom Fitton is getting on out there and he's expressing a lot of frustration, and I understand exactly where he's coming from. He's saying, where are the prosecutions? Judicial Watch uncovered evidence of the Clinton pay-to-play scandal in August of 2016. It was in the emails. You know, these people want to talk to the Secretary of State. You make sure they make a donation to the Clinton Foundation. It's there in black and white. And there should have been a prosecution long before now. There are so many crimes that have been covered by Judicial Watch and congressional investigations, and nothing is happening. And it shows you the tyrannical power of the deep state, how deeply corrupted it is. It's the narcocracy. Now, the gun control debate is still raging all across the country. And over at Information Liberation, they had this wonderful little headline. If we have to bake the cake, you have to sell the gun. And what they're talking about is this 20-year-old Oregon man who is suing Walmart and Dick's Sporting Goods for age discrimination because they're refusing to sell him a rifle under their new anti-gun age policies. Here's the problem. They're store policies only. There's no law that's been enacted yet raising the age to purchase a gun to 21. The stores just did it themselves and said, see, we're on board with gun control and school safety. And now they're being sued. Now, do you remember that teacher down in Georgia who fired a gun? One shot out the window, nobody was hit, was barricaded in his room. It turns out he was on several different antidepressants, according to the police. The problem isn't the guns, it's these medications that are messing up people's brains. Now, as you know, AIPAC is in town. They're having their conference, and they're having a little panel on press freedom, to which the press is not allowed to attend, for those of you who appreciate the irony. Now, the other day, we were talking about how Hawaii's own Tulsi Gabbard was introducing legislation to try and protect the integrity of the vote. And the legislation in question is House Resolution 5147 to amend the Help America Vote Act of 2002, that's the one that gave us the electronic machines, to require voting systems used in elections for federal office to produce a voter-verified paper ballot of each vote cast on the system. In other words, she's actually drawing the idea from what was called the True Vote system, which was that after you touched all the touchscreen buttons, it would actually show you a printed paper ballot underneath a protective glass, and the voter could look at it and make sure it actually said what the voter had voted for. And if it was wrong, the voter would push one button, and that ballot would be shredded, and it would start all over again. If the voter approved of it, it was then shot into the ballot box. It's a wonderful, good idea. Unfortunately, so many members of our federal government are holding their offices by election fraud. I'm expecting that Tulsi Gabbard is going to have a hard time getting any support for this one. And where is President Trump? He promised he was going to get on board cleaning up our elections. And if he doesn't, he's going to lose Congress in November, and he's going to lose the White House in 2020. So let's get on over to the war zones. Basically what's going on. The Syrian army is making tremendous gains in Ghouta. And this website, which is the southfront.org, came up with an interesting observation about the recent so-called chemical attacks, because they all occurred in areas where the Syrian army was winning and didn't need to use chemical weapons, which further underscores the fact that these are false flag attacks blamed on Assad to justify a new military aggression. And remember, before these chemical attacks even happened, word was coming out of Syria that, yes, the U.S.-backed rebels were planning more false flag chemical weapons attacks, and that's exactly what did happen. Assad doesn't have a reason to use chemical weapons. He's winning the war, and he understands that the use of chemical weapons will be seized on by the United States to launch a new attack on his country. And in point of fact, we're seeing this article out of Sputnik News, U.S. considering new attack on Syrian government based on the chemical weapons. Boy, have we been down this road before. Saddam's nuclear bombs, torpedoes in the Gulf of Tonkin, Spanish mine in Havana Harbor, Assad's sarin gas, over and over and over again. When are you going to stand up and start screaming, I refuse to be lied to anymore? Because that's what all America has to do right now. Just stand up and say, you are lying. Your words are worthless, and I am not listening to you anymore. Now, the U.S. is very subtly threatening Russia with a guerrilla war in Syria by continuing to arm these various militant groups and mercenaries and try and get Russia into a ground war in Syria with unconventional warfare, snipers, booby traps, things like that. Now, according to Russia's Foreign Minister Lavrov, the U.S. is not in Syria to fight ISIS. We already knew that. They never hit ISIS. They always hit everything else but ISIS. They always arranged for ISIS to escape encirclement. We know that the U.S. was supplying ISIS with weapons, food, ammunition, medical supplies. What the U.S. is really planning to do in Syria, according to Lavrov, is simply break it up into pieces, disintegrate it, make it go away. The Kurds will get a big chunk of it. Another chunk of it, the southern part, is going to be annexed by Israel. They want that Golan Heights. That's what they're doing. Now, according to a Syrian monitor, this is being reported in Euronews, over 5,000 civilian deaths are still unaccounted for in the U.S.-led strikes in Iraq and Syria. And basically, this means more than 7 times as many civilians have been killed by the U.S.-led coalition in Iraq and Syria than has been officially acknowledged. And there should be no surprise about that. We didn't find out the real death numbers for Vietnam until that war was long over. All right, we're going to take a phone call here from Patrick in Oregon. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, aloha, Michael. Good afternoon. Yes, when you were talking about Trump and that voter investigation, from the states.
Yes.
Yes, he turned that over to the Department of Homeland Security when the Democratic stronghold states wouldn't cooperate with him.
Well, it's a token gesture. I mean, Department of Homeland Security at the point of manufacture. And they're not connected to the internet, so it's not going to accomplish anything, because the real place where the vote fraud is happening is at the state level, with fraudulent voter registrations, with allowing illegal immigrants to vote. That's where the focus needs to be. We need a voter ID law, and it's not racist to say that people who are voting in this country have to prove they're legally allowed to vote, because we know that in 2016, millions of illegal immigrants voted, and millions more will vote this November because they're still pouring in across the border. The Democratic leadership has come on out and admitted they are dependent on the illegal immigrant vote to hang on to power, but they're not supposed to do that.
Right, and I understand, but I understand the Department of Homeland Security is looking at the states also, not just the voting machines, but I understand that they are looking at the voter rolls in these states also.
I had not heard that, and if it's happening, it absolutely needs to be done. But again, the big problem is the illegal immigrants. We have to have a voter ID law. I mean, look, the federal government was able to mandate real ID on all the 50 states, where you have to just jump through all these loopholes to prove you're actually a citizen. And why should we not do the same for the illegal immigrants when they're trying to vote? They're trying to vote our country away from us and into their hands, because the Democrats are promising them that.
Yep, I agree with that. I agree with that 100%, Michael. Yep.
Okay.
Yep, we do. Yep, we do need some kind of an ID system to keep these illegal voters from voting. Yes, I agree with you.
And it's got to be an ID system that is based on being a legal citizen. Up in Chicago, Rahm Emanuel is issuing IDs to the illegal immigrants and declaring that they will allow these immigrants to register to vote and then vote. That's not allowed. Non-citizens are not allowed to vote. And we're seeing all these Democratic strongholds just in flagrant violation of U.S. law. We're seeing it in Chicago. We're seeing it in California. Big stink out there about the immigration issue. And again, it's time for Trump to put on his presidential brass knuckles and start bringing about the changes he campaigned on. Because so far, we're not getting the Donald Trump that we voted for. Patrick, thanks an awful lot for the phone call. We got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. I can push a few more buttons around here. If you would like to help Republic Broadcasting Network stay on the air, and folks, it has never been more critical that you do so. You can see what's happening. The government, the corporate media have declared open war against the truth. They're ramping up their lies. They're going after our advertisers. This is serious. This is already a civil war in cyberspace. which I'd rather have it in cyberspace than on the streets of the cities. But still, it's open war by the liars against those who are trying to get the truth out. So if you can help, please do. It has never been more important and critical than it is right now. The address to send a check or money order to is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302. That's in Round Rock, Texas, 78664. The phone number, if you want to pledge to be a recurring subscriber, is 800-724-2719, extension 03. Now, getting on back to AIPAC, Netanyahu's had his speech up there on the stage, and he's out there ranting about Iran. We must stop Iran. We will stop Iran. We have to deal with this challenge. The translation is, you Americans are going to stop Iran for us. You know, we're not going to spend our money. We're not going to risk our precious children going into Iran. That's your job. That's what your place in the world is. Now, U.S. Vice President Mike Pence is saying that Washington, D.C. will withdraw from the Iran nuclear deal immediately if it is not fixed. And what he means by that, of course, is they want to basically change the deal. After everybody agreed to it, they want to change that contract. They want to add in long-range missiles and medium-range missiles. They basically want to strip Iran of the ability to defend itself from what is obviously a coming invasion. Frankly, if I were Iran's leadership right now, I'd say, okay, the deal is over. We're going back to making long-range missiles, and we're going to go back to making a bomb. Now, up at the United Nations, Nikki Haley, amazing, she can keep a straight face when she says things like this. She says the United Nations is obstructing Israeli-Palestinian peace by perpetuating the illusion that Israel is the cause of all the friction. To the sounds of muffled laughter, I'm sure. Over at Popular Mechanics, and let me preface this by reminding everybody that Popular Mechanics definitely toes the government line. I remember when they came out with their article attacking anybody who questioned the official story of 9/11, and they were quite insulting and it was a smear campaign. How could you doubt the government? Well, the government's given us lots of reasons to doubt it. So now they have a story out there, what Putin would nuke. And they're detailing this hypothetical first strike scenario where Russia just attacks us without warning and where they're going to bomb. So this is more of this be afraid of Russia propaganda from Popular Mechanics. They're laying it on thick. They're using the Beck's howitzer on us all right now. Now, Putin says that Russia is not going to start a nuclear war. And he says, why would we want a world without Russia? And again, he's sending that signal. Nobody's going to win a nuclear war except the bankers. Now, over in the Kashmir region, the Pakistan military have shot down an India spy drone, which is only increasing tensions in that part of the world. That's another possible flare-up point. And India and Pakistan have nuclear weapons. This thing could really get out of hand. Now, Fox News had a story featuring General Robert Ashley, who's director of the U.S. intelligence agency, one of the 17. Basically came on out and said that, yes, everybody's focused on North Korea's nuclear missile programs and Russia's recent unveiling of a heap of new deadly weapons. But according to General Ashley, the real threat is China, because China is creating advanced futuristic weapons capable of wiping out the West's current military technology. Well, a big reason for that, of course, is that the West's current military technology is pretty much old. Things over and over again. And they don't really do a very... And again, I highly recommend... It's very lighthearted and humorous, but it is based on the real story of the development of the Bradley infantry fighting vehicle. And it shows just how messed up the U.S. military procurement system really is. We're going to take another break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Now let's talk about Korea and what's going on over there. As you know, during the Olympics, North Korea came to South Korea. Everybody got along just fine. They were openly talking about reunification. They united their teams as a single Korean team. And Mike Pence basically refused to stand when the host team came onto the field during the opening ceremonies. And that is a tacky diplomatic no-no. So now we have South Korea went to North Korea. They're having talks about reunification. We got that the other day. That's why Kim Jong-un met with the South Korean delegation to push the issue for reunification into one Korea. And everybody's been talking about the possibility of peace talks. And so this article in Sputnik News, possibility of a great breakthrough, Korean peace talks depend on U.S. approach. Well, what is the U.S. approach? The U.S. approach was to slap more sanctions onto North Korea, claiming that the assassination of Kim Jong-un's half-brother was a North Korean government operation. There is no proof of that. Nobody knows who's behind it. The two women who actually carried out the assassination basically said there was an intermediary who told them they were playing a practical joke. So the evidence trail ends there. Now, Steve Lendeman is out there saying that, yes, there is no question that the U.S. wants the inter-Korean thaw undermined. They absolutely don't want to have any reunification and to propagandize and teach the American people to hate and fear. This is John R. Stockwell, a former CIA officer. That's what's going on here. The U.S. is trying to keep the world in turmoil. They're trying to keep the American people cowering in fear and hating who they're told to hate. But ladies and gentlemen, we're all adults. We can decide for ourselves who we should hate and who we should not. And my general rule of thumb is if the government is telling me to hate somebody, I'm going to be kind of mellow toward them because something is going on. So Lendeman points out Washington's been hostile towards North Korea throughout the entire post-World War II era because of its sovereign independence. They don't want independent countries. They want the entire world ruled by U.S. juntas. That's what they did in Ukraine. It's what they did in Iraq. It's what they did in Afghanistan. It's what they're trying to do in Syria, what they're planning on doing in Iran. They don't want any countries on earth that are not subservient to the Pax Americana enforced by weapons of war. Now, earlier I was talking about this quote that was being attributed to Putin about how we're going to poison you all, and it's not Putin's style. And I'm already getting emails from people saying, no, it doesn't sound like Putin at all. So now we have another one. This is also from the Daily Mail, where Kim Jong-un says the U.S. is the sworn enemy to humankind. And this supposedly came out of Pyongyang's Rodong news outlet, which is accusing America of being intent on pushing the planet into another dreadful nuclear disaster and destroying world peace and security. Well, that last part certainly lines up with what Stephen Lendeman's saying. Now, South Korean President Moon Jae-in is saying you shouldn't get too excited over the denuclearization talks, because probably Moon Jae-in realizes that North Korea would be insane to give up their nuclear weapons. It's like putting out a welcome mat. Please invade us to the United States. Now, the U.S. Navy is now boasting that they have accomplished their first shipboard deployment of the F-35B to the Pacific, and specifically the USS Wasp, and it departed Japan with an airworthy squadron of the jets aboard. And apparently they had, let's see, they don't see how many are in the squadron. I heard somewhere else it was 6. And now we're actually going to see those things in actual use and see if they hold up. The plane still has problems. It's got major problems, and they're trying to put it out there into the field. Now, the Department of Defense has blatantly admitted on Twitter that it works with Hollywood to sell you war propaganda. And basically, they're saying, I mean, it's been documented for many years, but the DoD is now admitting it. It, quote, works with Hollywood to ensure the military is portrayed correctly in films. Not accurately, correctly. Meaning, we're the good guys. We're the sweetest smelling army in the world. And all those other people, they smell bad and they're evil. And this is no different from the Nazi propaganda films from World War II. And as we look back on them today, we see very easily it's just propaganda. And I'm sure that future generations will look at the present fare from Hollywood and realize it's war propaganda. I mean, even looking at Hollywood fare from World War II, you look back on it and realize it was propaganda. Now, as you know, the Russian elections are coming up, and they're trying to demonize Putin any way that they can, to try and make it look like he's a tyrant and a dictator. They're trying to basically interfere with the Russian elections. So basically, the BBC has come on out and declared that Putin must have been behind the assassination of Anatoly Sobchak. And their entire case rests on the fact that Putin cried at the funeral. Oh, he was crying to cover it up. That was the entire case. He must be the assassin. He was pretending to be sad. He was pretending to console the family. Remember when Bill Clinton walked out of Ron Brown's funeral? He was laughing his head off until he saw the cameras, and then he immediately went into his crying act. Now, they're trying to make a big deal about the poisoning of this Russian double agent and his daughter. They're in the hospital, and it is serious. But they're trying to make it, like, major. And over at the Express in Great Britain, they're saying the Russian spy poisoning is Putin's declaration of war. Great Britain is now in an entirely new game. Well, first of all, there's no evidence that Russia had anything to do with it. They may have just decided they needed a dead body and a bloody shirt, and this guy was all used up anyway. And I don't see the people of Great Britain ready to risk nuclear war with Russia over one former Russian spy. It doesn't make any sense, but it's just this continuous, nonstop Russia bashing. And I'm not surprised that the ratings for the corporate media are where they are right now. We're all sick and tired of this stuff. We're sick and tired of it. The only reason I watch Fox News at all is to see what they're lying about today, and I only watch that during the broadcast times. The rest of the time, I'm on, Sci-Fi Channel or National Geographic or those wonderful Blue Planet 2 specials by Sir Richard Attenborough. Those are marvelous. I don't watch the corporate media anymore. Now, here's an interesting story. There was an information campaign working to persuade Londoners to not arm themselves with knives to defend themselves against migrant violence. Really good thinking. Now, Britain banned firearms outside of shooting clubs a long time ago. Crime went up, violent crime went up, home invasions went up, and Great Britain justified keeping the gun ban by saying, well, the British people felt they were safer, even though they were not. So now they're going after the knives. They don't want people carrying knives to fend off an attack by criminals and migrants. And so they had this Sadiq Khan crime campaign, and there were a whole bunch of celebrity endorsements in it, and they all turned out to be fakes. They were created by an advertising agency. They had one from actor John Boyega, who was in Star Wars The Last Jedi, musicians Lethal Bizzle and Jessie J. And none of these celebrities were actually consulted about whether they wanted to tweet or have endorsements. They just went ahead and did it. All right, we're going to take a phone call here. Mike in Chicago, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I heard you talking earlier about a real ID or, things are getting out of hand. And I do believe things are getting out of hand, and I'm going to tell you why. Because I'm 53 years old, and, I've been driving for, 35 years. But I just so happen to be a commercial driver, and all of a sudden, in the past couple of years, now they want us, no matter what, we got to bring a birth certificate or a passport. And, it's ridiculous because I've lived here all my whole life, and you know, but the system is so out of hand that now, you know, you got to prove that you actually belong here, you know, and you've been here your whole life. That's number one. And number two, I was out of work for a little bit of while, and I had to take Medicaid, and they sent me a letter stating that I got to go down to the office and prove that I'm a citizen. I mean, it's just, you know,
it's ridiculous. And yet the illegal immigrants are pouring across the border. The refugees are coming across the border. They're getting free stuff from the U.S. government. They're being told it's okay for them to vote. I mean, it really is. It's ridiculous. It's like the government is declaring war on the real American citizens. And maybe they just want us all to go away, and they're going to restart the economy on the backs of this immigrant refugee labor.
Yeah. And when I went up, you know, I had a copy of my birth certificate. I never really even needed that my whole life. In fact, I always let my mom hold on to it, you know. And I don't know, for some reason, I had a copy, and I brought the copy over to the DMV, and she's like, "Oh, this isn't this is a copy. We need the real one." You know, with the, you know, because she's trying to press on the seal. I says, "Come on, man! I've been waiting around for 2 hours in line here because the state of Illinois is broke, and they can't afford to hire any of you guys anymore. And now you're going to send me home, and you know, yeah." So I had to go all the way home, and I couldn't find. I went to my mom's house. I couldn't find. We couldn't find it, the birth certificate. So I brought the one I used. It got denied with. I brought it back, and some other woman there accepted it. I mean, it's like I wasn't going to say anything. I mean, you know, but what I did, I got a couple of birth certificates, and this doesn't probably matter, but they said they're going to change birth certificates now. So go get it. If you don't have your original, go get it because it's going to look different. So anyway, that's what they told me about a year ago. So, but I got a couple of them now, you know. But yeah, you're right, Mike. It's common sense because the system is broke. All right, and there's too many people that aren't supposed to be using the system, and now they want accountability, and we have to suffer, the people that have lived here our whole lives.
Well, it's a double standard. They're demanding that the people who've lived in the United States their whole life be constantly proving it before they interact with the government, if they apply for Medicaid, or if they vote. But the illegal immigrants and the refugees are getting a free pass. They don't have to go through all this stuff.
Yeah. Well, that's why it's happening. I mean, you know, it's just common sense that's why. But you know what? It shouldn't be happening, right?
No.
And I do believe, I'm with you on the voting aspect. That you know, that people that should be voting are voting their constituents in there, and I believe what you're saying about that, even though, you know, I don't have any proof in front of me about it, but anyway, well, I guess there's no way to keep the liberal system going but to blame the Russians. I mean, that's just, I mean, how, you know, what are they going to come up with next? Are we going to have a UFO invasion? Is that it?
Believe it or not, there was actually apparently some government agency was toying with the idea of faking a UFO invasion to get us all, you know, hot and primed for war and stuff, which actually they got the idea from an old episode of The Outer Limits called Scarecrow, if I recall correctly. But it is, the whole system is completely out of whack. It's almost like that commercial that we run here on RBN, where we, the American people, the citizens who've been born here or naturalized, the people who've been on this land for generation after generation, are under attack. We're considered enemies by the government, who are turning around and welcoming all the illegal immigrants and refugees with open arms. And it doesn't really make any sense at all. It almost seems like the government wants all of us real Americans to just go away and restart the country with this obedient, subservient, lower cost of support illegal immigrant population.
Yeah, and then again, think of the cheap labor too aspect of the whole thing. I mean, there's people that can't even they can't even speak English. Isn't that a prerequisite to entering a country is to be able to speak the language?
Well, if you're just going for a visit, no, it's a courtesy. When I was working in Europe, I tried to learn as much German and Italian as I could, and I was met with a little bit of gentle laughter, but they respected me for making the effort. But certainly, if you're planning on moving into another country, you need to learn that country's language, which in the case of the United States is English. And what is very angering about all these refugees and illegal immigrants is they're coming on in and demanding we learn their language. And that attitude has actually been prevalent in Los Angeles, even back to the time Claire and I lived there, where the Hispanic communities were all out there saying, we don't have to learn English. You have to learn Spanish if you're going to deal with us.
Yeah. I'll just tell you, Mike, I don't want to keep you. You got other callers. There's this one quick other story. My mom was telling me she goes to the store. She's all the time. She doesn't work or anything, but she's and there was a couple of women. She was behind in line at the store, and one woman, I think it was a daughter, and then a mother, and the daughter had a SNAP card, a supplemental nutritional assistance program card.
Yes.
It's a link card, and she swiped it, and the cashier said, "Oh, you owe me 2 cents." And the lady snapped. She's like, "This is America. Everything free. What are you talking about?"
we get that. We get that. Anyway, listen, Mike, I got to let you go. We got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Story that just hit here from Sputnik News. Apparently, a Syrian activist has acquired photos of the White Helmets film studio. And it looks like it looks like any other soundstage. They're faking documentaries about the so-called Assad atrocities. The propaganda is just not letting up at all. Now then, getting on over to Putin's new wonder weapons. There was an article that appeared in Zero Hedge, and it's basically talking about the weapons that Putin announced during his State of the Union speech. And this article basically says that Putin's hypersonic rocket is revealed to be a modified Iskander ballistic missile. And basically the entire case is they looked at the computer-animated illustration of the weapon behind Putin, and they said, oh, it looks like an Iskander, therefore it must be that. Now, of course, this is all based on the assumption that the computer-animated video of the new weapons is accurate in its details. And having worked on similar military animations when I was with Robert Abels, I can tell you that changes are made to the models to conceal important details. We went through, I don't want to say who we were working for, but it was actually part of the Strategic Defense Initiative, and we were illustrating some of the platforms, and we were told to make them different, make them look wrong, to conceal what was really going on. Do you remember when the existence of the F-117 stealth fighter was first revealed? The Aurora Model Company, little plastic model kits for those of us who built those things, came out with a plastic model kit of the jet, and everyone thought that was what the plane looked like. It was this long, slender shape with downturned wings and air intakes on the flat upper surface, which was the first giveaway to me that, no, this wasn't really flyable. In Tom Clancy's Red Storm Rising, his description of the stealth jets initiating the first attack on Russia matched the Aurora model. Then the real plane was revealed and, of course, was totally different. And I can imagine a lot of foreign governments wasted a huge amount of time and money trying to reverse engineer the stealth from that first Aurora model kit. We're going to take a phone call from Dustin in New Jersey. Dustin, I'm going to have to take you across the station identification, but what is on your mind today?
Like the Iskander is not dangerous. You know, anything is modifiable. You know, let me tell you, Mike, you had some phone calls the other day. I got to take issue with. Somebody called you, like, leaning toward globalism. You're not. You're leaning toward realism.
Yes.
You know, like, people don't realize what's going on. We had our day in the sun, Mike, as an empire.
Yes.
The British did, the French, the Portuguese, the Spanish, they all did. Our day as the empire is coming to a close.
Yes, it is.
I know a lot of Americans don't want to hear that. You know,
well, stay on the line. Stay on the line. I'll come right back to you after station identification. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 2. We're talking with Dustin in New Jersey. And Dustin, getting on back to the issue of the Iskander, it's ludicrous to say that they've taken an Iskander and given it a new engine, and now it's all of a sudden hypersonic. It doesn't work that way. The rockets, like any aircraft, are built to basically fly in a certain speed, certain altitudes, and they're engineered to be as light as possible. If you put a more powerful engine in it, and you're still dealing with the frame that is designed to travel at a slower speed, it's going to tear itself apart in midair. So it was kind of ludicrous to say it's just another Iskander. But you're absolutely right. The United States is an empire in decline. It's been in decline seriously for the last 30 years, and to be very honest, it's been in decline ever since the foundation of the Federal Reserve, which has been bleeding away the wealth of the American people, putting it in the pockets of the bankers, until there's nothing left here. Every single government seems to find some way to transfer more wealth from the American people to the ultra-rich. We're being harvested for wealth.
Yeah, Mike, the Iskander, I think D is the latest version. Remember, they're in Kaliningrad, so, you know, that's not a crappy weapon by any means. You know, that can do a lot of damage.
No, it's not a crappy weapon for what it's designed to do. It's the idea that they're saying, we're going to take this missile that flies so fast and put a new engine, and it just goes faster. We're not talking about, you know, a car on the street. We're talking about serious aerodynamic pressures. And if you want an illustration of that, look at the early failures of some of North Korea's missiles that were flying too fast for the stresses on them.
Mike, the reason they're saying that is because we're arrogant. You got, you know, the John Brennans and the Clappers and that other guy with the big mustache. What was his name on Fox News all the time? Looks like from comic book. You know what I'm talking about? The mustache, big guy. Looks like Marmaduke. I don't know what his name was. But, you know, they're always saying, no, it's all propaganda. No, it's not. Russia's 20 years ahead on missile tech. I want people to realize 20 years ahead on missile technology. I mean, we have technology, but it's not as advanced as the Russian, like with the S-400 and the S-500 coming out at the end of the year. You know, people need to realize, you know, we're not, even though we spend a lot more money, we talked about this the other day, you know, we spend $500 on a so-called hammer, which goes toward black ops. They spend $5, or China spends $5. Their money is more well spent on, you know, on smart weapons, you know. Hypersonic,
it's a completely different mindset. It's a completely different mindset. In the United States, the military-industrial complex is all about bleeding as much money from the American people as they can. And they want the weapons to be loaded up with all kinds of stuff that makes them cost more because of these cost-plus contracts. And it's a money-making, it's a scam on the American people. That's why they wanted the Cold War to come on back, so that they could go back to scamming the American people for more money for this so-called arms race. But Russia and China, it's a different mindset. Their goal is to make cost-effective weapons, and they're succeeding. They can produce more weapons for far less money than the United States, and in a real shooting war, the side that runs out of money first loses.
But that's what scares me the most, Mike. We're arrogant, and we're a hegemonic empire that refuses to let go.
Yes.
You know, Mike, some of your callers, I have to disagree. You know, they brought up the Civil War and tariffs. This is 2018. It's a different world now. It's not the same world. It's not the same world we're living in anymore. Things have changed.
Yes.
Those parts of the economy are not coming back. If Apple has had hundreds of billions of dollars, billions would it be, sitting offshore, and you think Trump's tax breaks for the corporations was going to bring jobs back, they would have brought jobs back before that. They were sitting on hundreds of billions of dollars. They chose not to because they're not coming back.
No.
I hate to tell it to people. They're not coming. The steel industry, not coming back. Automation is the future, which means all those people are going to still be out of work. Now, if you look who just left Trump's, his top economic advisor is leaving this week, Gary Cohn.
Yes.
That is a wake-up call to people. I supported Trump, Mike, but I mean, something's going on here.
Yeah, I mean, they're thrashing around. The stock market had another rough day. I mean, they managed to shove the Dow almost back up to the green, not quite. It closed at 75 down, but it was down more than 300 at one point.
It's unstable, Mike. Hey, Mike, did you see Putin's, not the speech he made with the new weapons, but there was another speech he made, and Mike, you hit that spot on, and he said, like, basically our establishment is destabilized.
Yes.
That's what I think's going on.
He said
scary,
our political system is eating itself, and he's absolutely correct on that.
It happened in Rome, Mike.
Yes.
The same thing. And Mike, you had a caller from California. He was absolutely right. I have to admit, I have to say, the 36 people who died on that plane, God help them, and they're fighting for the good cause. We're armed terrorists. They're a proxy army. I know people don't want to accept that. I'm very upset what's going on. I mean, like, there's a lot of crap going on.
There really is, and
realize
we're feeling it. Claire, Claire is having a tough time dealing with how real this is all getting. But again, people are definitely waking up, or maybe they were awake all along and staying silent out of a misguided sense of patriotism. But everywhere I go now, the car dealership, the supermarket, the medical clinic, whatever, everybody is now talking about just how close we are to a world war, how they certainly do not want it, how they think the government has just gone completely insane and we're sliding into dictatorship, and they're very, very angry about that. Dustin, I need to let you go. The phone lines are filling up, and I got a lot of stuff to cover tonight. So thank you for the phone call. We're going to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. And before I take another phone call, story just came on in. Apparently, this claim that Putin was behind this attempted assassination of this Russian ex-spy came from one of the British tabloids. And apparently their evidence was, it turned out to be a 5-year-old Russian internet meme written by a Russian 8th grader. And that was their proof to say Russia's behind the attempted assassination. And again, they're out there saying that Putin said, we will poison you, we will poison you. Anybody who's watched Putin in public, that's not his style. He doesn't talk like that. Khrushchev would have, not Putin. All right, let's take some more phone calls. Curtis in Nevada, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike, I just had to make a comment on that last caller's comment about empires in decline. Yeah, that's true. Those past empires rose to prominence and then declined and fell. But in this case, it's different because this is all by design. It's a plan. It's not just a series of plans. It's a certain designed plan. That it's interesting that you mentioned 30 years and the Federal Reserve, because if you go back, this plan started before the Federal Reserve. If you're familiar with Carroll Quigley,
no, I am not.
You know who Carroll Quigley is? Okay, he was ex-Georgetown professor. He was a mentor to Bill Clinton, and he wrote a book in 1966 called Tragedy and Hope, A History of Our Time. And that book was pulled off the shelves very quickly because he basically named names of this specific design of this plan to bring this country down eventually and bring about the globalist agenda.
Yes.
Now, this book reappeared in 2004 in another edition, whether it's, I'm sure they say it's close to the same 1966 edition, but I seriously doubt it. But the point is, Mike, is that, yeah, there was a plan, and the plan did involve the Federal Reserve, and it did involve 3 world wars The last one's pending, and it did start the whole mechanism with the legislators about the mid-'80s, which is about 30 years, which you saw how we gotten to this point.
Okay, well, Curtis, okay. Again, Occam's razor. I know that the globalists eventually need the United States to come on down, but they need us to be whole to take out Russia and China, which do not want to be part of the New World Order, one world government. And it may be that the U.S. collapse is actually going to be the end of the globalist movement because they will no longer have a military arm. Now, the fact that some globalists are thinking about ways to bring the United States down doesn't mean that everybody is on board with this plan. First of all, you've got to look at the money junkies. If the U.S. collapses, all of their wealth becomes worthless instantly. They're not working to bring the system down. They're trying as hard as they can to prop it back up. That's where we got the plunge protection team and the rigging of the stock markets, the rigging of the unemployment rates. They're trying to make it look like everything is okay, not like it's coming on down. I don't think they're trying to deliberately bring this country down. I think they can't stop it. And just like ancient Rome, just like the former Soviet Union, it's coming on down.
And Clinton was the last nail in the coffin, and that was derailed. And the reason, when you see everything happening now, you're seeing two different governments, one throwing a punch, the other one throwing back. Trump does not have complete control. He doesn't even have control of the military, of the intelligence, of the media, the politicians. Everything that you say that's happening.
That what I agree with you.
North Korea.
That part I agree with you. Trump is not in control. That's why I say he's got to get his brass knuckles.
So when you see something happen in Syria, you can't say this is Trump and the United States doing it. It's the
it's the United States doing it. General Wesley Clark. Hang on. Let me talk.
Doing it.
All right. We're going to let you go, Curtis. Now, back in 2005, General Wesley Clark blew the whistle that the United States, as a matter of policy, had created a plan to conquer all of the nations of the Middle East to control their oil, or more specifically, control what currency the oil was denominated in. And I know every once in a while there's a book that comes on out and says there's a grand evil plan in the far distant past that is being enacted. And there may have been a plan. But our government is so badly factionalized, and right now the globalists are trying to hold Europe together. I can imagine that there are interests who would like to see the United States come down. But I think there's far more people, especially in our current establishment, who want it to go on perpetuating. And frankly, if we could find a way to restore our constitutional republic and our democratically elected leadership, I would like the U.S. to continue as well. I don't see that happening. I think the problem is not those who are trying to bring the country crashing down. I think the problem is they can't hold it off any longer. In fact, somebody put up an article here about how this tariff war, this trade war, could be a smokescreen for the coming stock market crash. Anyway, we're going to go back to the phones. Boy, the lines are just full. Mark in North Carolina, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
How you doing, Mike?
Doing
Mike,
okay.
I wanted to really first talk about those missiles, but you piqued my interest about China because I listen quite a bit to InfoWars too, and according to Alex Jones all the time, China is part of the globalists. They're part of the, and that they're a main instrument of the globalists, and that's the type of society they have, and that's what the globalists really want is something like China. And you say something different, and I've heard other people say different things about China too. So I'm just wondering, what really do you think is the deal with China? Do you think they're part of the New World Order? Do you think they really don't want to be part of that?
I think probably the vast majority of nations on Earth don't want to be part of the New World Order, especially seeing what the globalists have succeeded in doing to Europe right now. China is the world's oldest continuing nation, and they've gone through some dramatic changes, but they love their sovereignty and they love their history, and I don't see China as being amenable to surrendering their national identity and their heritage and traditions to be part of a global mass of humanity. I don't see that as happening at all.
Well, I'm talking basically about the leadership of China. You think that's the case? And are they really communist anymore? That's another thing. Everybody says communist, 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 communist. But there's everything I know about communism. It doesn't seem to be really doesn't seem to be a communist nation.
They saw how well that Hong Kong and Macau were doing under capitalism, and they've gone capitalist, and they're doing very well because they're a manufacturing power, and they're in economic trouble now because they became overly dependent on the U.S. importers of their products, and people in the United States can't afford to buy products anymore, even at the big box stores. And so it's all slowing down. And there's been a domino effect across the global economy. It's all grinding to a halt right now. But in answer to your question, no, I don't see China wanting to be part of a new world order. I don't see Russia wanting to be part of a new world order. And the more and more, as we see what's going on in Europe, with all this multiculturalism and open borders and the rest of it, I think probably more and more countries around the world are saying this is a bad idea. The problem I have with the New World Order is it's being brought about by subterfuge and hoax, global pandemics, global economic crash, global environment, global warming, for example. And so just as we're seeing the corporate media try to do to the independent media right now, a global government is going to be the worst tyranny in history. It's going to have to be to survive the circumstances of its own creation.
Well, as far as Russia goes, they're the nemesis of the globalists. The thing is this: there is a. I've heard of quite a bit, and especially, who proposes it a lot is that fool Glenn Beck, that mental case, that Russia is behind every nationalist movement, including our own. They're behind like Madame Le Pen there in France, the guy there in Italy. I'm not sure what his name is. People in Hungary, Poland, Czechoslovakia.
Oh, they're already claiming that Russia rigged the Italian elections to put in the Eurosceptic parties. I mean, anything bad that happens in the world is going to be blamed on Russia by the corporate media. It rained today. Obviously, Russia has a weather weapon. My car got a flat tire. Vladimir Putin is putting nails in the road. I mean, it is that over the top, and that's silly.
And it's if we're stupid enough to believe it. I mean, I even heard this new thing now. They say that the Second Amendment. Oh yeah, that idiot Schiff there, Adam Schiff there. The globalist there from California.
Yes.
He says that the reason the Russians support the Second Amendment because they want us to kill each other. That's plain ridiculous.
I mean, some of the quotes by the gun grabbers. In fact, right now there's an article on the front page of whatreallyhappened.com, and it's titled "The Top 10 Most Idiotic Anti-Gun Statements Made by Leftists," and you have to read it. You will be laughing at just how clueless these people are about the subject.
Hey, by the way, do you hear about what happened to Schiff there when those two Russian comedians got a hold of him and he fell for it, hook, line, and sinker?
Oh yeah, that was wonderful.
About Brighton Beach in Brooklyn, Uncle Misha. You should talk to Uncle Misha there, and they'd have information about Trump running around nude or something like that.
Yeah, I remember that one. God, that was funny, and he just fell for it. He was just so desperate to find something that they can use, and Donald Trump is really nice. The image of him running around naked, not something I want to see. Yeah. Anyway, Mark, we're going to let you go. And we're going to hold off more of the phone calls until after this next commercial break. But interesting little perspective on all of this from Russia Insider, saying that Russia's new nukes checkmate a war-happy U.S. and actually make the world safer. We're back to mutually assured destruction. But they are correct in two aspects. The U.S. is war-happy. Look how many wars we have initiated over the last 18 years. It's always the U.S. that attacks first. We have not been attacked by anybody. We are the aggressor. We're the bad guys. I know you don't want to hear it, but we are the bad guys. And if, in fact, Russia's new weapons are real, and they give the United States a reason to pull back from this agenda, then yes, we are all safer. We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be back with more phone calls after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to go back to the telephones to Cody in Texas. Aloha, Cody. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind today?
Aloha, senor.
Aloha.
I've got a comment about Mueller after I ask you a couple questions about when is somebody that's doing all this investigating on the Clintons going to put two and two together. This goes all the way back to Bill Clinton being the district attorney for Arkansas, negotiating all the deals with China to get into the United States in the first place. Not to mention that, we lost that laptop with the nuclear weapons secrets in it just about the time that we started allowing North Korea. So this treasonous espionage has been going on for over 30 years. And when are they going to put point A to point B to point C and realize that this is just their modus operandi, whether it's the coal fields that they shut down here in the U.S. so they can start selling, so the U.S. will start buying from overseas. When you were talking, it was either yesterday or the day before, about what they do to Uranium One, how they shut down our uranium, and it just all is complete reflections of scandal after scandal after scandal, and they all are tied into the same brain factor that's creating all this, scandal after scandal.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure that everybody inside the Beltway knows what the Clintons have been doing, knows what everybody else has been doing. The idea is the system is trying to protect itself and perpetuate itself no matter how corrupt it becomes. But history has shown, whether it was ancient Rome or revolutionary France or Romania or the Soviet Union, there comes a point where the corruption becomes so bad, the system just tears itself apart. And Putin is right. Our political system is eating itself right now. You've got the liberals and the conservatives almost at open war with each other, certainly an open war against Donald Trump. And yeah, Tom Fitton is right to be getting angry. Judicial Watch found actual court-worthy evidence of pay for play by Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, and nothing has been done.
Which leads me to my comment about Mueller. I see him, everybody's blaming Comey this, Comey that. I don't see Comey as anything except a minion of Mueller's. Mueller was the head of the FBI before he was the head of the DOJ. So, if anything, I believe Mueller is the head of this entire chain of corruption. And that's why you can't, it's just roadblock after roadblock. This thing goes all the way to the top, even went down into the median grades of the FBI. There's got to be, that secret society that they talked about. I think it's a lot bigger than just a half a dozen people.
Oh, I would agree. I would tend to agree. And again, it's institutional corruption. And it's been growing over the last 30 years. Goes all the way back to, again, Arkansas in the mid-1980s, when the CIA was running an illegal, clandestine gun and drug running operation into Nicaragua out of Arkansas under then-Governor Bill Clinton. And the CIA loves to be trafficking in illegal drugs. They were doing it in Vietnam with opium because it gives them money that they don't have to explain. They don't have to go to Congress and say, this is what we're doing. It's what they like to call an off-the-shelf operation, outside any possibility of civilian or congressional oversight. And over time, they've used that money to basically, corrupt the entire government. We saw something similar during Prohibition, when the alcohol corruption eventually tainted the entire government. Judges, everybody, police chiefs, it was horrible.
I think we can blame the CIA and for the opiate addiction that's so bad right now. I think they're running the poppy fields, whether it's Afghanistan or India or wherever they're growing the poppies. I can guarantee that the CIA and branches of secret government, military, are guarding those fields, and it's just their own little drug lords.
Yeah, they really are. And again, I guess they get tired of selling the opium on the street corners and running the risk of arrests, so they just encourage doctors to prescribe opiates. And they've been overprescribing and overprescribing, and now you've got millions of Americans are addicted to prescription opiates, and the emergency rooms are full of overdoses right now.
They've gone on to phase 4 of their policy. Now they don't have street corner drug pushers. They have legal drug pushers doing it with a pen and paper called prescriptions.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's all I got today, Mike. Enjoy your show. Love your show. We don't always agree, but 90-point-something% we always do. So,
well, that's
be
close
encouraged.
enough.
There's a bunch of us out here.
Well, thank you very much for that. We're going to let you go. We're coming up on another commercial break, and before we hit that commercial break, CNN is now admitting that the town of Kennesaw, Georgia, since passing their law that every household had to have a gun, they've had only one murder in 6 years and a violent crime rate of less than 2%. There is the object lesson against gun control. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to go right back to the telephones. Francis in North Carolina. Aloha, Francis. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha to you both.
Aloha.
First off, well, one note regarding Claire. The other note that it was a side issue. I was a little bit dismayed to learn that North Korea is going to be going into a conversation regarding their, I guess, not so much nuclear power, but as far as missiles are concerned or whatever, and the assisting of that, or whatever you want to call it, for that matter. As for Claire, I'm presuming that since she's having an issue, last I heard, whenever you were driving and the road being in a poor condition, this may have been thought of already, I don't know. But I find that having a cushion of sorts that can be in the seat, let alone a pillow, helps to buffer.
Yeah, she's using one. She's using one. Now, when we lived over in Kaonohi, we had a neighbor who was a chiropractor, and we've decided we're going to go back to him because the one she's seeing now isn't doing anything. And there was that other guy that we went to that just tried to exploit Claire's pain to get us to sign a contract for an entire year of treatments. And that just felt too kind of scummy. So this is going to be happening next Monday, and hopefully this guy's a friend. He's a friend of the family, and hopefully he's going to put her back together. But she's doing better, but she's not all the way better.
Well, there's that. Well, I'm glad that at least there's a cushion being used in that road scenario, because potholes are a pain in the, well, you figure it out.
Yeah.
Wishing her a recovery.
Well, thank you very much. One thing we have to do, we have to stay off Kamehameha. It's just been torn up by that light rail project, and it's a horrible road. So we have to go around and just stay off of it. That's how bad the situation is. All right, we're going to switch over to Steve Elkins. Steve, thank you for waiting so patiently. And what is on your mind today?
Well, I have to agree with what you said. It's hard to admit this, that the United States is the bad guy here. And I hate to even admit it, but I do say the same thing. And you have to ask yourself, well, what other country has over 800 military bases around the globe, acts like a dynasty, imposes their will, and has an actual program of, an agenda of nation building? I don't know any other country that talks about invading other countries in a nation building effort. No other country does it but us. So I agree with you. Yeah, I hate to admit it. It's embarrassing to admit it, but my country is misbehaving. They have misbehaved for a long, long time, and I'm holding my breath. But I would love to see a change in course, where we finally have a president that says, we are in a continuous state of war. This is going nowhere, but making us much more poorer and making a few people richer on the military-industrial complex side. But for the most part, our infrastructure is falling apart. Everything is coming apart. But we got to stop this course. We got to change this course drastically, or we will not exist.
I agree with you, but again, I still think that we are on the verge of a major collapse, both of the economy and of the U.S. government. The only concern I have is that as it is collapsing, the U.S. may just decide to strike out at the rest of the world and take the rest of the world with them. And that's the real danger.
Hey, Michael, do you think this tariff thing, increasing tariff on steel 25% and 10% on aluminum, is because he says we can win an economic trade war? They're easy to win. That's what he claims. Do you think that's actually what he's trying to do, and then bring jobs back or bring industries back in this country, or is this one of those situations, one of those agendas to push us to the economic collapse where he can say, look, so-and-so caused all this and it's not our fault? Is this going to be an excuse, or is he actually serious about bringing back jobs and industry back in this country? I just wonder if it's going to be used as an excuse.
Well, Trump did campaign on putting tariffs on imported products to try and stimulate domestic production. And at the time, it did sound very good. Unfortunately, right now, with the world already tense over the possibility of war, it's being perceived more as another indication of the U.S. trying to bully the rest of the world, and it's not being very well received. And it's not creating that many jobs. I understand that there is one aluminum company and one steel mill that are planning on starting up again, and they're hiring an aggregate total of 800 people. And it's nice that 800 jobs are being created. But in a nation with 90 million unemployed legal American citizens, it's symbolic more than anything else.
Right. I agree. Hey, thanks, Michael. Appreciate it.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Dave in Missouri. Aloha, Dave. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, howdy, Mike. How are you doing today, brother?
I'm doing good.
Good, glad to hear it. Hey, I hope your little car works out well for you. I really hated to hear what you had to go through all of that, but I'm glad that it's finally come to a successful conclusion, and the people seem to step forward to help you out in a time of need.
Yes.
That we're still a neighborly, loving people at heart. I mean, as divided as we are, as much of the media wants to portray us as animalistic or we just want guns so we can kill each other. That's not who we are as a people. And so to see folks step forward to help you in your time of need, it just blessed my heart, and I know it did yours. Steve Elkins, what a patriot. Godspeed, brother. Keep doing what you do. And I would kind of like to talk about the tariff situation, because in my view, Mike, and I know we differ on this a little, to me it was tariffs that created the Industrial Revolution, the great middle class that built our industry, and what was the greatest economic force in the history of the world at that point, because we protected our factories from offshore slave wage competitors who did not reinvest or share our values. Case in point, China, which was an economic shambles before Clinton normalized trade in '94. We've already been through this, my favorite corporation to revoke the corporate charter of for economic treason would be Walmart for paying Bill Clinton, Hillary's company, to flood rural America with poison plastic junk for our landfills that fall apart in your bag on the way home. Completely inferior garbage, as you remember, whenever, it's gotten better a little over the years, but it's not meant to last. And so, I'm a supporter of the tariffs. I believe it should be much more. I think companies like Walmart should be massively penalized for looting the American prosperity over the last 30 years, reducing the middle class, all the poverty, destroying our industrial capacity to support ourselves. So, I have no problem with, I don't know why necessarily steel and aluminum first. It is kind of the basis of so much manufacturing. But I want to talk to you about this too. Parkland, I'm sure that I haven't heard your comment on this. Did you hear the teacher who was interviewed who said, she walked out in the hall after she heard what was going on and seen the shooter, and her first thought is, why are the cops here? He's in all black. He's got on armor, helmet, and a mask, shooting a very unique gun that she said she could recognize. Completely blackballed by the MSM, as are all the kids who were saying there had to be multi-shooters. Man, how can they pull this off all the time?
Well, the reality is they haven't pulled it off because they keep trying it, and the corporate media keeps trying to sell it, and now the corporate social media is trying to shut us down. But the reality is we're seeing through these fakes. We saw through the fake at Boston Marathon bombing. We saw through the fakes at Sandy Hook. We saw through the fakes at Columbine. And we understand. We are the most lied to people on the face of the earth. And we live under a government and a corporate media that just lie to us constantly to get us to do what they want us to do. And you know something? I want to spend the rest of my life doing what I want to do. Okay? I don't want to be...
Wouldn't that be nice?
I'm sorry?
Yeah, well, wouldn't that be nice to be an American and actually be able to exercise the free will that God gave us and our Constitution guarantees? Wouldn't that just be awesome? But
yeah.
You know, I'm scared to death because I tried to be supportive of Trump, even though he's done many things that I didn't like. But when I seen him sitting beside that rich socialist on his left hand, saying, "Well, let's just take the guns first and work out the legalities later," and she's wringing her hands with that evil Hillary cackle. I mean, dude, that scared me. I mean, who is this guy? And why hasn't he done? He's got the biggest opportunity. Well, I mean, why aren't we auditing the pentagram? Why aren't we auditing the Federal Reserve? He's got the biggest opportunities. I mean, I believe maybe somebody had to get to him and say, "Hey, dude, it's only the farce finance and military-industrial complex that America has as an economy anymore, since we've exported all of our factories and industry to communist China and every other slave state." So I'm thinking maybe he is actually trying to protect what he understands is the actual only viable economy that we have, the military-industrial complex and the fake finance system. I don't know what your take on that is.
Well, that may well be a big part of it. Trump is looking around and realizing he doesn't have anything to work with to try and bring about a change.
Oh.
And that may be the reason why he thought the tariffs were a good idea. And obviously, his economic advisor, Cohn, disagreed with him, leading to his resignation. But there are some new developments regarding audit the Fed. We're going to talk about that when we get to the economic section. So, Dave, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go, and we're going to switch over to Neil in California. Aloha, Neil. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael, and the United States of America. Love you all. I hear a couple things that the IG that everyone is talking about should not be investigating this because he's part of the DOJ. He was the IG that fought Obama for 4 years to get IG privileges to actually do investigations. His first investigation in 2016, when Obama, sorry, I had to run to get the phone. When Obama actually let him do his job, his first case was the Clinton Foundation or Hillary and the uranium one. I lost track of which one it was.
Trying to do the job right.
And that's what I see, and that's what I heard from what I heard earlier, is this guy wanted to do his job and was being held back by Obama, which is Hillary's culprit in the crimes involving Hillary and the Clinton Foundation. So now he's actually doing his job under the Trump investigation. The only investigation claims have been found to culpate Hillary.
Yes.
So if the IG is doing his job and Mueller's doing the Trump investigation, they have to actually put this information together and not exclude it from each other because of the process of the legalities of who's doing what. So now they're actually all looking at it, and they're actually working on draining the swamp. It might be slow. And the guy who, the economics director who just left?
Yes.
Oh, that's a bad thing for for Trump because, his trade embargo made him want to leave. No, he was an Obama appointee. He's a Democrat. He wanted to vote and get the Paris Accord going. He's a climate change or global warming advocate. There are a couple
He's
other
a globalist.
So
he's a globalist. He's a globalist, and like I said when we were talking about his resignation, this guy was instrumental in pushing out of the White House all of Trump's advisors who were nationalists, all of the advisors who were behind this idea of making America great again, Cohn was instrumental in getting rid of them and surrounding Trump with advisors who are pushing the globalist agenda.
And that's why I am so happy to hear that he walked away today.
Yes.
He didn't get fired. He walked away.
Well, at that level,
again goes back to
when you're being fired, you're offered the opportunity to resign to save face. That's kind of something that happens at the higher levels of business and government. It's very rare to see somebody actually fired. Apparently, James Comey was probably given the opportunity to resign and refused, and at that point, Trump fired him.
I completely agree with that because I have run some small business stuff and had to deal with employees. So you do give your employees an option to save some face or get disgraced. But I want to go back to, we talked a few weeks back about we're draining the swamp and we're letting them walk away on their own, take their own head between their tails, and the information is being put out there because we're not stopping the investigation, which is what everybody wants. Oh, fire Mueller, fire Sessions, fire everybody. Well, no, that's just going to make you look bad because you're going to get rid of the investigators. The investigators are actually helping him. The investigators are going legally where nobody else can go. And if you were to name Hillary as the investigation or the Clinton Foundation as the investigation or Comey as the investigation, it's now a war on and everything's going to get hit. So the more that they're not looking at them, the more they're finding out about them.
I'm not sure that's exactly what's going on, but obviously there does need to be a special counsel appointed. And Sessions is already digging his heels in. He's now saying he needs a factual basis to launch a special counsel. Well, they certainly didn't have a factual basis when they launched Mueller's investigation. That was completely inappropriate. It was in violation of the special counsel statute. And Mueller has gone completely off the reservation. He was supposed to investigate Trump-Russia collusion, and he's found absolutely nothing. And he's on this fishing expedition. And meanwhile, we have this hard evidence of Hillary's pay for play coming out of Judicial Watch and a bunch of other stuff. And nobody wants to go near her. Nobody wants to touch her. She's the face of the deep state narcocracy, and everybody's afraid of her.
Completely agreed with.
Okay.
She is the culprit. She's the one helping hide Obama. The rest of them are hiding both of them because if this goes out, their entire party looks like, a train wreck.
The entire government looks like a train wreck. I mean, if it all comes out, the entire government will collapse. The American people just won't see it as legitimate anymore. Be just like the Soviet Union. All right, well, listen, Neil, we're going to let you go. We're going to close the phone line so I can get to some news when we come back from these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And we're going to go ahead and take one more phone call before we close the lines, and that's Errol in the Netherlands. Errol, welcome back to the show. What's on your mind today?
Thank you for taking my call. On Wednesday, 21st of March 21st, 2018, we have a referendum on the law on the intelligence and security forces. And in that law, it says you can vote yes or no. They state in the law, you got a brochure, they state in that they can, when you say yes, they can, without your consent, they can enter your home and they can enter your business. So I was studying this. This is a referendum, again, Wednesday, 21st of March 2018, for the Dutch citizens. And the law says, they do very simple. They say, yes, okay, many private citizens, your privacy will maybe be in danger, but we can go into your home without your consent, without your knowledge, and in businesses. So when I read that, I was like, no way. So I'm going to vote no. I got my, because in Dutch it says stempas, so vote pass. I'm going to that ballot box and I will say no way, because this is going too far. This is going too far.
Well, listen, after the referendum, please call back in and let us know how it turned out, okay?
Yes, I will. Thank you for my call, and I wish you a good day.
Well, thank you very much as well. We're going to close the lines here and get back to the news. Looking at the email coming on in, somebody commented on the caller in favor of tariffs. And the email says, he suggests the U.S. originally had successful manufacturing because of tariffs which kept China at bay. My history is probably sketchy on this, but at the time, the U.S. was a manufacturing powerhouse. I don't think China was, at that particular time, any type of competition regarding manufacturing. And that is a very accurate assessment. Now, another reason why the U.S. became a manufacturing power, even very early in the history, was following the American Revolution, and Americans were no longer required to buy from British companies. They didn't want to buy from the British companies, and that launched this incredible development of textiles and various other industry here in the United States of America. It was a source of national pride. In fact, right up until about 30 years ago, our manufacturing was a source of national pride for this country. And then it was all basically frittered away by the globalists who wanted to have a planet where all the electronics were over here and all the car making was over here and all the agriculture was over there, to make us permanently dependent on the rest of the planet and not be independent. We're going to take a break for station identification. Back with the news after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show, hour number 3. The phone lines are closed right now because I'm way behind on the talking points, and I do want to get through all of this news about the pending wars and the economic news. There have been some developments down there as well. Now, with Putin's announcement of Russia's new cutting-edge weaponry during the State of the Union speech, everybody started screaming that, oh, there's a new arms race and Russia's causing it, Russia's causing it. And Putin has basically corrected everybody by reminding them that the start of the new arms race began under President George W. Bush when he pulled out of a 30-year-old missile treaty in 2002. And yeah, that was basically when it started. And George Bush started putting money into developing new weapons, new nuclear weapons, updating or upgrading the old nuclear weapons. The U.S. started the new arms race. And we know that ever since the fall of the Soviet Union, the military-industrial complex has been working as hard as they can to get a new Cold War going. And they almost had to wait for Russia to recover from the collapse of the Soviet Union before they could be portrayed as enough of a threat. And now we have this other gentleman who's out there saying, well, China's a threat too. China's a threat as well here. Now, the Russian deputy minister is Alexander Fomin is out there saying that the U.S. is getting ready to encircle Russia with 400 anti-ballistic missiles. And again, this is because the U.S. pulled out of the ABM treaty. So again, this is all initiated by the United States. The aggression is coming from the United States. Now, we mentioned this a little bit earlier in the show on one of the phone calls. Putin is saying the U.S. political system is eating itself up. And he says, basically, it's frustrating. It's inefficient. It's factionalized. And he says it's quite difficult to interact with such a system because it's unpredictable. And he says what's going on with the United States is they are a dying empire and they know it. And they're trying to reassert their hegemonic domination. They don't like strong, powerful countries that represent competition, such as Russia and China. Now, over in Turkey, despite threats from the United States of sanctions and who knows what all else, Turkish President Erdogan is saying that he is going to go ahead and buy the S-400 missile system from Russia because it works better and it's less expensive. Now, there's another piece of propaganda that's come on out here where the FBI is trying to claim that 2 terrorists are being found every week in the United States. There are all these jihadis running across the countries. They're in all 50 states. And the FBI is saying that a jihadi can attack in just 30 days once he's radicalized. And there are 3,000 anti-terror investigations underway across the United States of America. Well, I don't know about you, but that sounds like a good argument for allowing U.S. citizens to be armed to stop the terrorists. Now, Haiti is still smarting after the White House's blank hole comment, and they've hired a public relations firm to try and fight back and produce a more positive public image of Haiti. It's going to be very difficult. The place is still a wreck. All that money was donated to help Haiti recover, and it all disappeared. It went away. Very little of it actually reached the people of Haiti. Now, President Donald Trump is reportedly criticizing former President George W. Bush's decision to invade Iraq, calling it the worst decision ever made and describing it as a big fat brick into a hornet's nest. This coming from the man who is about to invade Iran. Little bit of irony there here. Story coming out of Huffington Post. Legal scholars are trashing the Pentagon's effort to prevent a Senate debate on the Yemen war. Now, as you know, Congress is trying to reassert its authority over the war making of this country. And they're very concerned about the bad habit presidents have gotten into of simply sending troops wherever they feel like it without a congressional declaration of war. Now, there are limits to the War Powers Act. The president can deploy the military to deal with an immediate crisis that threatens the United States. But he only has about, I think it's 30 days before he has to get Congress to grant permission to go further. And the Congress is trying to basically take back their constitutional authority and their constitutional duty. So apparently, as we know, last week there was a bill introduced by Bernie Sanders, Mike Lee, and Chris Murphy that basically says Congress must declare war before we go to war. Now, the Pentagon is pushing back on it. They like the idea of an imperial presidency that sends them off to do war across the planet because it means more money, more promotion. They're going to have a lot of fun, except for those who get killed, of course. And what's really alarming, though, is that apparently the Trump administration is pushing back against this bill as well. All right, we're going to do a shout out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. As I mentioned earlier in the show, it was a bad day on the Dow. It ended up only 75 down, but at one point it was over 300 points down. I can't imagine investors are very comfortable with this volatility and the general downward trend. But a lot of what we see on the Dow is no longer human investors anyway. It's these high-speed computer trading systems literally warring with each other to grab as much cash as they can from each other. But after a while, there isn't enough to go around. We're going to start seeing some problems showing up. Now, the caller who was talking about how the Federal Reserve needs to be audited should be encouraged about this because Rand Paul has added an amendment to the Senate banking bill calling for a full audit of the Federal Reserve. Now, the Federal Reserve is going to go nuclear. They're going to fight back on it. They're going to get their lackeys in Congress to say, we got to take that amendment out. The Federal Reserve doesn't want the American people to know just how much wealth the owners of the Federal Reserve have harvested off the American people using nothing more than ink and paper and numbers in computers. They don't want you to know that. But if you look at the owners of all these private central banks, these families who've been playing this scam for 300 years on planet Earth, they're the richest people on the planet. They're so rich you never hear about their names. They don't want to come out of the shadows. But they're trillionaires. Article out of Gold Core, a little reminder, gold does not fear interest rate hikes. And because of the talk of interest rates hikes coming out of the Federal Reserve, interest in gold is increasing. And with it, the price is going up. Now, American tech workers have gotten a little bit of good news. The employment-based H-1B visa requirements are being toughened. It's going to be a lot harder for these tech companies to bring in foreign workers. So they're going to have to be looking at the domestic employment market. That's a good decision. I agree with that. Story out of Investment Watch blog. The petrodollar to petro-yuan shift is underway now, and it will kill the dollar. Now, right now, the petrodollar, which is the U.S. dollar backed up by other people's oil, is the glue of the current monetary system, and it goes back to 1971 to Nixon's shock, when gold convertibility to the U.S. dollar was ended. And there was a massive destabilization period that followed that change, and it was stabilized by coming up with the petrodollar, which was to get the Middle Eastern oil countries to price their oil in dollars so that foreign demand for dollars would go back up. And it pegged the monetary system to a credit cycle which is built from that point forward. Well, China and other nations are moving away from the dollar. For one thing, they're seeing how dependency on the U.S. dollar and the U.S.-dominated banking system makes them weak, makes them victims, because the U.S. is flinging sanctions left and right, like Johnny Appleseed planting apple forests. Now, the debate over the tariffs is continuing. Trump is now saying that he will exempt Mexico and Canada from the tariffs if they agree to a new and fair NAFTA agreement. And Trump is saying that we have large trade deficits with Mexico and Canada. Yeah, we've got trade deficits with pretty much everybody because we don't have anything to sell. So NAFTA has been a bad deal for the U.S. It's resulted, again, in car factories going to Mexico. Now, Trump has inherited a real mess, and I don't agree with everything that he's doing. But if it is all going to come apart, we can't blame him solely for it. He inherited this mess. It's like Herbert Hoover all over again. Herbert Hoover did not cause the Depression of the 1930s. It was caused for him. Now, the trade wars are about to go nuclear. The U.S. is considering broad curbs on Chinese imports. And they're talking about just all kinds of stuff. Electronic devices, clothing, everything that's out there. And as that caller said, this is going to impact the big box stores who are selling all of these imported goods. Because if there are going to be curbs, there's going to be a shortage of supply. And maybe this is going to stimulate some investment in our domestic manufacturing, which we need to do. And it's going to take a while to build it back up. It took 30 years to lose our manufacturing. It's not going to be rebuilt overnight. And it has to be handled carefully. Now, in an example of what I mean about our foreign policy being disjointed, uncoordinated, and basically at war with itself, Trump is now asking China to reduce the trade deficit we have with them. And I don't think China is going to be willing to go along with that. The trade deficit is working in their direction. They're bringing that money back to the U.S. and buying real estate with it. And of course, China is very upset over Taiwan. China is very upset over the South China Sea. China is very upset over what the U.S. is doing in Korea. I don't think we should expect much cooperation from China. Now, the domino effect that I spoke of the other day, when somebody called in favor of the tariffs and I said, sometimes yes, right now, no. The domino effect is happening. This is a repeat of what happened under George W. Bush's tariffs. Brussels is now hiking charges on billions of pounds worth of U.S. exports to Europe if Donald Trump imposes the steel tariffs. And they're basically going to be putting a tariff on everything coming from the United States. This will include a new 25% charges on yachts, peanut butter lipstick, bed linen, motorbikes, trousers, everything, absolutely everything. So whatever manufacturing gains Trump was hoping to get with the aluminum and steel tariffs are going to be offset by the fact that other countries are not going to be buying our products. Now, the president of the Federal Reserve is now saying that the coming trade wars may delay the rate hikes because they're expecting an economic slowdown as a result of the trade tariffs. It is really a mess out there. Article that came on out of shtfplan.com, how the Trump trade wars may be a perfect smokescreen for a market crash. Everybody seems to know that one is coming anyway, but if you have the trade wars going, then it allows the U.S. government to say, well, it's China, it's the European Union. They weren't playing fair on the trade wars, and that's why we're having a market crash. Europe is renewing their tariffs on Chinese steel pipes as high as 72%. Now, a little bit of good news. U.S. Steel is starting up one of their plants in Illinois, the Granite City Works. They're firing up one of 2 blast furnaces, and they're hiring back 500 workers. So good for them. U.S. aluminum manufacturer announces 300 new jobs in Kentucky following Trump's tariff announcement. Now, it looks good, but again, in a nation with 90 million unemployed American citizens, 800 jobs, it's more symbolic than anything else. Now, the second largest U.S. nursing home operator, HCR Manor Care Incorporated, has filed for Chapter 11 protection. They have $7.1 billion worth of debt. Part of their financial difficulty are shrinking margins and reduced government reimbursement rates, low occupancy, and apparently part of it goes back to the pension disaster, because some of the people in the nursing homes are paying for the nursing home with pension funds that are starting to run out of money. Now, the cost of housing has soared so high, Americans are sliding into poverty. Not because the Americans are in decline, but because the line where poverty begins is moving higher. And housing prices are rising at unprecedented rates. And it's just insane. But the reason the housing prices are going on up is to try and create artificial equity, to keep the value of the houses above the loans that have been used to buy and flip them over and over and over again. We saw this happening back in 2008. Now, in San Francisco, housing rental prices are through the roof. They're actually paying far more for accommodations in San Francisco than we do here in Hawaii, which most people assume is a high-rent state. We've heard about all these people in Silicon Valley who are working for places like Google and having to live out of their cars. But there's a new phenomenon that is starting in San Francisco. They're bringing back dormitories for working adults. You can't afford your own apartment anymore. There's a dormitory where you get your own bedroom, and there's a shared kitchen, shared bath facilities, and apparently this is where mid-level, middle-class people are starting to live. Maitre d's, teachers, bookstore managers, lounge musicians, copywriters, merchandise planners. They're now living a dormitory lifestyle. And maybe that's part of Agenda 30, that we all live in barracks or dormitories. And only the very, very rich get their own homes, because after all, they deserve them. Over in Ukraine, they are feeling the effects of this very harsh winter because Russia's Gazprom has now shut off shipments to Ukraine over unpaid bills and unfulfilled contracts. And yeah, I think Russia showed a tremendous amount of patience on this whole issue. Now, the Vatican has indicted the ex-head of the Vatican Bank, who apparently embezzled something like $62 million. And there's a third suspect who passed away and will not have to go to trial. But they have a lot of problem with their bankers. What was his name? Calvi, Roberto Calvi, the Vatican banker who wound up hanging underneath a bridge in London with rocks in his pockets. Now, as you know, the Italian election was a real poke in the eye to the European Union. And in France, Macron is admitting that the Italian election result is a brutal message to Brussels. And he's admitting the big problem was the migration pressures. All these migrants going into Italy and just trashing the place, crime, rape, vandalism. And the same thing is happening in the other European Union states. They've had enough. They've had enough of the harsh economic realities, the predation of the European Central Bank, and they've had it with this open borders idea. Now, as it turns out, even as our corporate media is claiming that Russia rigged the election, it turns out George Soros was in there, pouring money all over the pro-EU political party. And it didn't work. They still lost. The people are speaking. Now, there's a Danish politician, Urskov Jensen, who is saying that the problem of third world immigrants integrating is insoluble. They're basically a generation, they've received 500,000 third world immigrants in a country of 5 million people, 6 million people, and they cannot support themselves. And they can't do any better than to obtain subsidized jobs, jobs that are created by the government. And he's got a solution, which we'll explain after we come back from these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're talking about this Danish politician, Urskov Jensen. And he's basically talking about Denmark, a country with about 6 million people, actually less than 6 million, and they've taken in nearly 500,000 third world immigrants, and they're unable to support themselves other than through government subsidization or subsidized jobs, which is where the government pays companies to hire these immigrants. And unfortunately, this is going to be a phenomenon reproduced from generation to generation to generation. So what Jensen is suggesting is basically to pay immigrants to go home again. Denmark wants to go back to being Denmark. They don't want to be part of George Soros' vision for a blended human population here. Trump actually told the Swedish Prime Minister directly to his face, "You have immigration problems." Yeah, they really do. Now, this story really ticks me off, and it probably will you as well. The federal government, our federal government, the United States of America, gives $2 billion to businesses who will hire aliens over American citizens. The U.S. government is incentivizing businesses to favor immigrants over Americans to the tune of $2 billion in subsidies, according to the Center for Immigration Studies. They do this through something called the Optional Practical Training Program, and this program provides money to businesses that discriminate against American citizens in favor of immigrant ones. I mean, talk about betraying the American people. That is just absolutely insane. We have more than 90 million American citizens willing and able to work, and our government is paying businesses to hire the refugees. That really is insane. I'm very angry about that. Now, Jeff Sessions is bringing a lawsuit against California to strike down the sanctuary laws as unconstitutional. And if he wins, the legal precedent will basically carry to the other states, cities, and counties who claim sanctuary status. And this needs to happen. All of these sanctuary cities, counties, and states are in violation of existing law. Title 8, Section 1324A, unlawful employment of aliens. Title 8, Section 1324, bringing in and harboring certain aliens. Title 18, Section 2384, seditious conspiracy. Title 18, Section 2383, rebellion or insurrection, which is exactly what the government of California is doing right now. Title 18, Chapter 96, the racketeer, influenced, and corrupt organizations. They're already in violation of the law. These mayors ought to be in handcuffs. Certainly the mayor of Oakland, who aided and abetted illegal aliens and obstructed justice, needs to be in handcuffs right now. Now, out in California, Governor Jerry Brown held a press conference, and he's out there, he's ready to fight. We're going to war. We're going to war. The U.S. government is full of liars. That I will concede. But they're going to fight the lawsuit. Ultimately, they're going to lose, because the law is the law is the law. Meanwhile, back in Europe, over in Paris, a 35-year-old man of Sri Lankan origin was attacked by two assailants armed with a machete and a saber. And they stormed this Indian restaurant in Paris, a 10th arrondissement, which is a home to a large South Asian community. And they just chopped this guy up. Meanwhile, an illegal Algerian migrant was arrested for the murder of a homeless man. And he was caught, basically found wearing the victim's shoes. So there's your multiculturalism here. And two girls have been arrested in France after trying to set a church on fire. Fortunately, somebody walked in and they saw 10 of these little blazes set on papers and books and Bibles and everything. But the most high-profile attack on a church in France came in 2016 when a pair of Islamic radical jihadis attacked and killed priest Jacques Hamal while he was giving Mass. The year before, French authorities foiled a similar plot by an Algerian migrant who was planning to attack churches in Paris with military-grade weapons. So you can see why people who are looking at what's going on in Europe are understanding the New World Order is not for them. They want to keep their culture, they want to keep their peaceful society, they want to keep their own indigenous language, their own indigenous religion, and we're going to see a continuing and growing pushback against all this open border nonsense. Meanwhile, up in Vermont, which you wouldn't consider to be a hotbed of illegal immigrant activity, apparently 11 European illegal immigrants were arrested after crossing from Canada into Vermont. Well, at least they got those 11. We got to take another break for commercials, and we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Now, things in South Africa are really headed in a bad direction. As you know, their new president has enacted a plan to simply take farms away from the white farmers who have lived on those farms for generations, no compensation, just direct confiscation, and give it to the black people. And there's another politician, Julius Malema, who leads the country's Economic Freedom Fighters Opposition Party. He's in a race for a mayorship against a white opponent. And he's out there saying, we're cutting the throat of whiteness. And he basically says, we're going to target the white people. He praises the plan to hand land to black people and vows angry white people can go to heck. This could actually happen here. We're seeing the beginnings of it with this attitude that it's okay to discriminate against white people for being white because of slavery, which was over and done with long before any of us were born. The world is going crazy. So, now, remember Fast and Furious? There was this murdered Border Patrol agent, and Brian Terry was killed in 2010 by an illegal immigrant with one of the weapons provided by Fast and Furious. And his brother, Kent Terry, is now pushing for the Fast and Furious case to be reopened. It never will be, especially right now in the climate of pushing for gun control, because it's obviously embarrassing to the gun grabbers that the government was giving assault weapons, military weapons, to drug criminals. At the same time, they're trying to say that the law-abiding American people should not have them. And what was going on is the U.S. wanted to arm one particular cartel to create a monopoly, to get up, and the CIA. But this took place in Tarrant County. Defendants in court are sometimes strapped with a remotely controlled stun belt around their legs. The devices are used to deliver a shock if the person gets violent or attempts to escape. But in the case of Terry Lee Morris, the judge used the device as punishment for refusing to answer the judge's questions during this 2014 trial on charges of soliciting sexual performance from a 15-year-old girl. In fact, the judge shocked Morris 3 separate times, and it scared him so much that Morris barred him the defendant from attending his own trial. That's a violation of the Constitution's Sixth Amendment, and the charges, the conviction, was thrown out. All right, we're going to take another phone call. Andrea in Oklahoma. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, I got in my car and there was Sean Hannity talking on the radio. And he was talking about, hey, everybody, we all need to get together and sign this with the states. It's called, it's the states have gotten together and got a bill together, and they're going, and I'm going to send it to you, about signing. They're wanting to, it's the Constitutional Revolution at Convention of States. They're wanting everybody to drain the swamp. Everybody wants to drain the swamp, and he's Mr. Sean Hannity saying, everybody, if we all get together and sign this, maybe we can get the swamp drained and keep it drained, and they'll have bills a bill that they're going to put together to drain the swamp. So anyway,
well,
I'll send
there are two problems
information.
with that. There are two problems with that. I've been hearing about calls for a new constitutional convention. Back in the 90s, there was actually a resolution that almost got enough states on board, which said if the national debt went over $6 trillion, the federal government would be dissolved. But they failed to get the necessary number of states to sign on to that. The problem with a constitutional convention is who would be running it and who would be chosen to be delegates. And a lot of people are very concerned that a constitutional convention is just an attempt to get rid of the old Constitution and the Bill of Rights and put in a new system of government even more favorable to the ultra-rich and the tyrannical. And it's a lot of people don't want to take that risk. In addition, the problem that we have here is not that there's anything wrong with our current Constitution and our Bill of Rights. The problem is a government that thinks itself above the law and acts accordingly. And a whole new Constitution and a whole new Bill of Rights isn't going to change that.
Well, I'm with you on that one. I didn't see that side of it. Oh, my gosh, how scary is that?
Yes.
Okay. Well, in March, they're supposed to give more money to our government to keep it running. If they can't come up with the money, I think that might be a good deal, too. Even though I hear a lot of good things about what happens, what Trump's been doing here lately with business all of a sudden kicking in and more jobs being created, and I don't know how long that's going to happen, but
well,
it sounds good.
Let me comment on that. I mean, so far the number of jobs that have been created, first of all, we don't even know if how many jobs were lost in the same period. We may still be in a negative trend. And again, with 90 million Americans out of work, 800 new jobs, it's a token effort. And the other issue I have right now with Donald Trump is we're seeing corporate media and even elements of the government come down on the independent media. They're literally at war with us, and Trump isn't doing anything. Now, the independent media worked very, very hard to help Trump overcome Hillary Clinton, and he's turned his back on us. And we have to be very concerned about that.
Okay, well, I'm with you on that, too. Well, I thought I would just mention that, but now it just sounds like a terrible idea. I'm sorry I took up the time.
Oh, no problem there, Andrea.
Thank you
for the phone call. We're going to let you go and switch to Charlie in Los Angeles. Aloha, Charlie. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, stupid people in America. That's all. Those people in South Africa gave up their guns.
Yes.
Right. Now, these people are kind of like the liberals you might find adopting 8 African babies and bringing them to Columbus, Ohio, and you'll find them on the front page of the newspaper. Now, this, like you said, can happen here because when they get their hands on the firepower, then they're going to want the average farmer who's now down, whose land is now like a 4,000-acre farm. He's going to have to give up all his land back to the Indians, but he can keep a quarter section of land or a half section of land. And I guarantee you that's what's in the cards. Maybe not in my lifetime, but this is the Bolshevik Revolution in slow motion, and it's on the books. I bet you somebody somewhere in this country, they want the farmers to give the land back to the natives, whether it's going to be the Mexicans in the south or the Sioux Indians in the north. this is on the books. And so all you farmers out there that are buying into these fake shootings and you're getting conned into, more and more restrictions on your firearms, you can bet that your great-grandchildren might be fighting this battle without weapons. Thank you for taking my call.
All right, you're welcome. I don't know that we're looking at taking the farmlands and giving them to the Native Americans or the Mexicans or whatever. Liberals tend to be socialists. And under socialism, at least as it was practiced in the Soviet Union, the state owned all the land. And the state owned the farms, and you were allowed to live there and work there. And that was how that operated. And we already know that agricultural corporations are trying to find ways to get rid of the small family farms and acquire the land and just turn them into these gigantic, almost state-sized corporate farms. And yeah, farming as I knew it growing up is in rapid decline, on the verge of being extinct here. All right, getting on back to the news here, a little bit of news about computers. The Geek Squad. They're in the Best Buy stores, and they will come to your home and they'll fix your computer and everything. And apparently, documents have come on out that the Geek Squad repair people have a very cozy relationship with the FBI. They're paid to be informants. If they find something on your computer that is questionable, like child porn, they will turn you in, for which they are being paid. So this idea of a right to privacy is definitely going away. And I'm not supporting people with child porn, but like copyrighted music files, or maybe there's a letter that you've written that sounds threatening. They just look through all the files. And again, it makes a good argument for having what they call a shirt pocket drive for your private stuff, which just plugs into a USB port. They come in terabyte sizes now. And, if you're concerned about somebody getting into your computer and finding something that you want to keep private, it's time to actually keep it in offline storage until you're using it. Now, story coming on out of Breitbart, CNN turns to outright gangsterism to silence Alex Jones. And he starts by describing the old protection racket, where a couple of gangsters walk into a store and they say, "Nice business you got here. Be a shame if anything happened to it." And it's an act of extortion. And this is exactly what CNN did to a number of business owners last week, meaning the independent media. And what the gangsters at CNN want to do is silence the political right, to chill our speech, to remove us from the debate, to end our influence, so that only the liberal point of view is being heard by the public between now and the November election. And it is nothing less than extortion. CNN is upset. Their ratings are down. They want their ratings to be high again. They can't start telling the truth. That would be the end of corporate media and the government. So all they can do is try and crush out their competition, which is us. And as small as we are and as poor as we are, we're apparently now seen by the corporate media as a formidable enemy, a force to be reckoned with. Now, over at the New York Slimes, they've come on out with an article about how YouTube is cracking down on certain videos, and it's couched completely as how these are all far-right videos. They're conspiracy theories, and nobody should believe any of the stuff they think David Hogg was a paid actor and Parkland was shooting. So the New York Times circulation is probably going to take a hit from that one. Google, through Gmail, apparently is starting to filter newsletters, because over at CLG, they sent out a newsletter listing all of the oddities with the Parkland shooting, and Gmail users found it automatically sent to the spam bin. And like I said, the independent media played no small role in helping Trump defeat Hillary, but it appears he has turned his back on us. Now, as you know, there is a lawsuit against Twitter, and it is a 29-page complaint basically saying that Twitter is not allowed to discriminate against speech on their platform based purely on viewpoint. Twitter has basically started off with the idea of, we don't allow porn. Tom Fitton is out there explaining why the panic is on. He's saying the establishment has lost control of the information battles. According to Tom Fitton at Judicial Watch, we're winning the information war. That's probably why the corporate media is on the warpath. Their entire wealth and prestige and position in society rests on being able to convince you, the American people, to choose a certain president, Hillary Clinton, to be supportive of a certain war, Iran, to buy a certain car. And if they can't do that anymore, they're going to have to start learning how to live with much less money and much less influence. Those talking heads on those corporate news broadcasts are not paid those huge sums of money to tell the truth. They're paid to be very convincing liars. That's their job description. They're supposed to stand there with their hair on fire and insist convincingly they cannot smell any smoke. If you want the truth, you go to the independent media. It costs you a lot less. Now, apparently, credit card malware has been discovered in at least 160 Applebee's restaurants. Good reason to go back to using cash, frankly. Now, this is an interesting little story. iPhone has a security feature where if you enter the passcode wrong repeatedly, it locks the phone. For a 2-year-old boy got hold of his mother's iPhone and played with that passcode thing and ran up a 48-year delay before the phone can be used again. I think somebody at iPhone wasn't really thinking this all the way through. There needs to be a cap on that delay so it doesn't get out of control like that. I'm sure it'll be in the next patch. I'm hoping that the child's mother can plug the phone into iTunes and reset the phone that way. Now, to nobody's surprise, a poll is finding that the iPhone X is simply too expensive for happy iPhone owners. They don't see a reason to upgrade. In fact, it's being described as twice as expensive as the old smartphone, but not twice as good. The iPhone X is for the Rolex wearers. People who want the prestige. I have the iPhone X. Okay, fine, big deal. Now, apparently, Amazon Echo has a problem. Alexa is not only ignoring commands, it is emitting laughter at random intervals. Now, Alexa is programmed to respond with laughter to certain things that you say, but for some reason, Alexa is just doing this at random times now. And sometimes in the middle of the night. And there are several different laughs in there. Some of them are a little creepy, and people are getting weirded out about this whole thing. Meanwhile, out in California, humans are starting to attack driverless cars. We're seeing a rage against the machine, a rage against automation. People understand what's happening. Self-driving cars, taxi cab drivers are going to be out of work, truck drivers are going to be out of work. Anyway, we're going to take a break. Back with the last segment of our program after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And as you're probably aware, there is another major winter storm that has hit New England. And again, I'm trading email with my relatives who are back there. And it's a doozy. More than 2,000 flights have already been canceled. And they're expecting 2 feet of snow, 24 inches. Never one to give up on their human-caused global warming booga-booga. Story coming on out of the Daily Caller. Scientists claim global warming will cause more heart attacks. That's probably false. That's actually in the headline. That's probably false. So even Daily Caller isn't going for it. It says a new study makes the highly questionable claim that man-made global warming could increase the number of heart attacks due to more erratic fluctuations in daily temperature. Now, up in Canada, there's a big stink going on in Ontario because of the global warming situation. They decided that they were going to put up some windmills in a small farming area. But unfortunately, they drove the piles for the windmills too deep into the shale bedrock and contaminated 16 residential water wells. And the contamination destroyed the pumps and piping. And as a result, apparently, under Justin Trudeau, they're spending anywhere between $50 and $100 million for legal battles to sway scientific study and avoid admittance that they were stupid. Now, over in Great Britain, they're dealing with a very hard winter there as well. Shops are charging £8 for bottles of water as taps across Great Britain run dry. It's been so cold, water pipes are bursting. Now, the reason water pipes are normally buried as deep as they are in the ground is the ground acts as an insulator and keeps the water in them from freezing, because water, when it freezes, expands, and it will break the pipes that it is in. Now, at your house, if you're in this kind of hard freeze, all of your outdoor faucets, you need to leave on just a little bit, just a little trickle of water, and you'll get a nice little icy stalagmite underneath it. But it gives the water some place to go when it's expanding. If you leave those shut off completely, you could lose the pipes inside the walls of your home. But apparently some people are in trouble, and there's price gouging going on for the water. Now, as you know, this Monday, the mainland goes back to daylight savings time. The Florida Senate has okayed a bill for year-round daylight savings time. California actually tried that some years back when I was still living in Southern California. But during the winter, kids were having to go to school in the dark, so they went back to the old system. Apparently, Florida on social media, email, maybe you need to start creating mailing lists so you can get past the censorship on the corporate social media platforms. We have to keep up with this fight. Okay? The first one to surrender loses. We have to stand up one more time, then corporate media knocks us down, and we will be victorious. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.